Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
He's good.
Yeah.
I'm muting the sound on YouTube. I want to see if she still hears the sound.
I think you should.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Bell, could you take roll, please?
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Lane?
Here.
Dr. Roberts?
Present.
Ms. S. Jones?
Present.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Here.
Ms. Horn?
If there is no opposition, I'd like to request that the board excuse Ms. Donna Jones for tending to an out-of-town family matter and Natalie for a medical matter. Would there be any opposition to those being noted as excused? Thank you. We'll say the pledge. First item on our agenda is a review of the consent agenda for February. So there are only 6 items, so we'll take them individually and in order. Are there any questions on item 1, which is the purchase of some camera equipment? Item 2, to approve the payment to the International Baccalaureate Organization for Metro. Item 3, to approve a contract with Cord Moving and Storage and Fry Wagner Moving and Storage. Item 4, the purchase of custodial supplies. Item 5, a contract renewal with environmental consultants for hazardous material consulting. And item 6, the purchase of maintenance supplies, repairs, and equipment. Are there any that you want to go back to? With that, I believe we're ready for the superintendent's report.
Good afternoon, board. At this time, we will have a Chief Academic Office update from Dr. Paula Knight. We also have the network superintendents joining us tonight in case there are any school-specific questions. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is the time of year where I give the mid-year review based on the divisions that support teaching and learning. And so as you can see, there are several divisions here that I will cover, and I will take any questions toward the end. So athletics, due to the pandemic.
Excuse me, we'll take questions by section, by each section, because it's a fairly long presentation. So after each section, if the board has any questions, we will take questions at that time.
So at the end of each one, okay. So athletics, due to the pandemic, there were several reductions to the winter season. Some students opted out due to the numerous times that we had to have COVID testing, which was every 2 weeks. And then there was also the lack of interest. Also, what we decided to do in the athletic division was to move the season to the alternate season, alternate spring season, which means, for instance, our football season will now overlap with track, tennis, and baseball. There are some structures that we have put in place because we currently have basketball that is occurring. So some of the structures that we put in place to ensure that our children, as well as our ADs and coaches, are safe during this time is that we have temperature checks, limited spectators, and whenever we have spectators who are coming to the games, we have their names on a list in the event that we need to go back and have any type of contact tracing. Any questions? College and career readiness. So if I may put this in context, in 2004, the Council of Great City Schools conducted an audit in the district, and what they found was a number of inequities that we really needed to address. The 3 major issues that came out of the council's audit of career and college readiness was, 1, we really did not have an office to address college readiness. AP classes to ensure that we had enough AP classes for all of our students, as well as dropout prevention. So from there, in 2015, the Office of College and Career Readiness was established. And there's what we call college areas within all of our high schools. AP classes, you've received a list of all the AP courses that we have offered, and to expand it beyond what we currently were offering during that time. And then to address the issue of dropout. So right now, we currently have identified dropout prevention specialists within all of our high schools. So from there, College and Career Readiness has a number of programs under the umbrella of CCR, and we currently have 20. There's approximately 20 programs or services for our high school students, up to and including early college, the Early College Academy, what we call ECA, that's on the grounds of Forest Park Community College. And we also have our electives, computer science, as well as launch code at Career Academy or Clyde C. Miller, as well as Gateway STEM and Vashon. So this is a data tracker that the Office of College and Career Readiness that they maintain. They also share this with the high school counselors, and it captures all of the high school students and looking at their ACT scores. And really what this does is that it gives us an opportunity to address any issues where we may be losing children along the way. What's not here are the Nottingham seniors, because many of our children at Nottingham CAJT, they're expected to graduate in 4 years, but oftentimes that may not happen. And then we also have the Edmentum students, and those are our children who are taking the online courses. Any questions?
Yep, for the dropout prevention specialist, is that a standalone role? Does that overlap with other duties for that person?
It is.
It is
It's a-
standalone, it's
it's-
covered by comprehensive school funding, and we have 3 that are signed out of Beaumont supporting our comprehensive schools. And so those are 3 positions that are funded by comprehensive dollars that are standalone to focus on recovering students who are in danger of dropping out or dropping out.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Mr. Lane, was there a follow-up?
I have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question. Yeah, on the ACT scores, are we doing anything to help the students improve these scores? Or are most of our students expected to go to open enrollment colleges?
So within ACT, we do have supports that are put in place where we have after-school tutoring, we have Saturday tutoring. So we do have structures to address ACT because we know that that is a challenge, but we have put those resources in place through the foundation.
Do we offer ACT prep courses?
We do have ACT prep courses. Yes, we do. What's not here and what I failed to mention was freshman success teams. And what the freshman success teams do at every high school is that they monitor the success of the incoming 9th grade students, because that, as you all know, that is a grade that has a tendency to, where we have a tendency to lose children along the way. So those freshman success teams work with freshmen to monitor attendance and academic performance.
Do you have a sense for how the percentage of students with ACT scores compares to this time last year?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can get that for you.
Yeah, that would be great. My concern is kind of how, especially in COVID, are we making sure students have access to the ACT? And without comparing to last year, it's a little tricky to determine if we're kind of in line with where we normally are, or
We were an ACT testing site in September, October. And so we tested our students, but also students in the entire region. Other sites had canceled, but it was a Saturday session. We are contemplating what's going to happen in the spring. And normally we would have a ACT testing during the school day, one day in the spring. We're not sure about that right now, but that's what would normally happen. But we'll give you some feedback as it relates to what happens next.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And with us being an ACT testing site, at least this past year, is that only for SLPS students?
For all students in the entire region.
Citywide.
Citywide. Other persons that canceled, and they asked us, we debated if we should do it, and we decided to do it to support our students, but also students in the region.
Assessments. So this is the first semester assessments that we completed. What's not here are the common formative assessments as well as the common summative assessments, which were considered, which were allowed to be optional this year. But these are the assessments that we have completed to date. These are the upcoming assessments. The additional assessments you see are the EOC as well as MAP. And what's not noted here, but it is also an additional assessment, is MAP A for our special ed students. So these two charts just give you just a reminder on the assessments for this year, first semester, and then what's coming second semester.
It should also be noted that the state just recently at the January board meeting indicated that they are going to be likely requiring students to do the MAP assessment and the EOC assessments. They are extending the window of time for that to take place, but the test must be in person. And so with us having about 25% of our high school students in person, it will be a real challenge to get students in person, sitting in a seat to do the assessment. There are possibly giving the option for a district to look at their own assessments and for those students who don't come in, but at this point in time, it is expected that 3 through 8th grade as well as our high school students will be required to come in, sit in the building, and do the state assessments.
So for the optional formative, or the optional common formative and summative assessments, so we opted out.
We made that optional for all the schools.
It's
Just-
optional, so it's by school, the school will choose.
Yes, and what you'll see later on, Mr. Lane, is that some schools, even though it was optional district-wide, there were some schools who opted in, who continue to administer the assessments. Curriculum and instruction. So you've seen this slide a few times, and this really is just a reminder of our blended learning instructional framework, as well as the standards-based curriculum that we currently have in place, and to continue to provide support to all of our teachers regarding our professional development theme this year, which is around every teacher is a virtual teacher. What I want to make certain that I remind everyone, remind the board when we talk about curriculum is that, as you know, curriculum is indeed a living document. During the summer months, we connected with the content specialists at DESE. We wanted to share with them our framework to ensure that we were in alignment based on standards. We also took this a step further and we reached out to the Council of Great City Schools. We have what I call the CAOs have a call every Tuesday. And what I did is that we looked at the curriculum quality rubric, which many CAOs across the country use this tool to ensure that there is strict alignment to the design, implementation, as well as rollout. So when we rolled this curriculum out, we were able to work directly with some of our content specialists at the state level. Some members from the curriculum team were also a part of that, working with the state level, and then looking at the quality assurance document that the Council of Great City Schools rolled out. The virtual learning playbook, which really details synchronous as well as asynchronous information. If you have not had an opportunity to look at that playbook, please do so. It is on the academic webpage. Click on curriculum, and all of the virtual links and tabs are there. That really speaks to what we're doing around virtual.
Is the curriculum quality rubric also there on that page?
It is not on our page, but I can send you the link, Mr. Lane, if you'd like to take a look at it.
That would be great.
Okay. Any other questions? So this next slide, we've talked a lot about unfinished learning. And so DESE has identified the key strategies when we're talking about unfinished learning. And just to remind us that there is a difference between, when I say a difference, when we talk about unfinished learning and learning loss really speaks to the summer slide. When we're talking about unfinished learning, this is a research-based term that has come out of the pandemic due to school closures. And so there are key strategies. And what this chart does is that it outlines what the state is saying around how we address unfinished learning and what the academic office is really doing to address this. So the first strategy is to select priority standards. We did that. We identified those priority standards within ELA, math, science, and social studies. And the middle column just gives you a description of what exactly that means, just more in layman terms. And then the academic office, exactly what we did to identify those priority standards. The second one is to unpack the standards. And so when we talk about unpack or unwrap the standards, there are multiple sub-skills within a standard. So you may have a standard, let's say for instance, R2C, which is specific to reading and comprehension, but there are a number of sub-skills within that one particular standard. So the state is encouraging districts to ensure not just provide the standard, but ensure that everyone understands the sub-skills that's embedded within each standard. And then scaffolding. Scaffolding is about interventions and what teachers are doing to ensure that children are mastering the content. And we do that through our blended learning design tool. And so as teachers are planning lessons, they have an opportunity to scaffold lessons based on student needs. And so also there, and you should have this link, and if you don't have it, I can certainly provide the full white paper that the district wrote back in early fall around all the work that we're doing to address unfinished learning. Questions?
That link is on the St. Louis Public School site.
Yes, ma'am. So the next four slides are addressing when we talk about standards. So this slide captures the algebra standards within Scantron. And if you notice the chart that's to the far right, these are the standards that we concentrated most heavily on this year. One of the reasons, or really the only reason why we did it this way, was because of the struggles and the consistency around lack of mastery within these standards. So we were pushing these standards for teachers to concentrate on. And if you notice, the blue graph, the blue bar, are the results from 2019. So you have, it's based on the quartiles. You have below basic, proficient, and advanced. If you notice the orange, where there's leaps, because we have really focused on these standards. And these are the high priority standards, most heavily weighted standards. And these standards are also introduced in 8th grade. So children will get these standards in 8th grade and again in 9th grade when they take the algebra assessment. This is the for ELA. And even though the leaps are not nearly as great as they are in mathematics, one area that we really wanted to concentrate our focus on this school year was around writing. And so the curriculum coordinators provide writing prompts that teachers are able to use with students. And if you notice the standards that start with W, research, writing development, revising, and editing, that's where we struggle the most. So those are where we are concentrating our efforts around ELA in high school. So like I said, the leaps are not as great, but you can see that there is some movement for ELA, high school ELA. And continuing on with standards, this is for elementary. This just gives you a snapshot. And Mr. Lane, this speaks to the CFAs and the use of the CSA. So some schools that were actually using it. And this is based on standards. So this is really difficult to read, but it just gives you an idea. These are the standards, drawing conclusions based on textual evidence, reading comprehension, vocabulary development. Those are the standards that we are concentrating most heavily on at the elementary level. And so with the common formative assessments, as you know, those are the assessments, they act as a diagnostic or a benchmark before the content is taught. The CSA is administered after the content is taught. And then you can see the progression from there. Any questions on that?
Yeah, just for clarification, the standards, for instance, in algebra, for example, are these standards the minimum standards for that a student has to meet prior to graduation, or just after freshman year in high school?
This is freshman year. This is their EOC freshman year.
Now, what happens to the student who didn't learn arithmetic well? Then what? Do we go back to ensure that those students, I mean, when I was in high school, if you weren't ready for algebra, you went back and took the basic courses to prepare you for algebra, so you wouldn't take algebra and then just never learn anything. I mean, what do we do for those students?
Yes, ma'am. So some schools have double dose. So they have a double dose class where they are able to address some of those areas that need that level of remediation. We have tutoring where teachers are working with kids before and after school, but the double dose has really been put in place to address the need for remediation.
Do all high schools have that or just a few?
I won't say all the high schools do, no.
Dr. Knight.
They have it as needed. They have the ability to schedule double dose classes if they need it based upon pre-assessments or based on A-grade scores coming in. So some of the magnet schools may have 1 or 2 classes. Some of the comprehensive schools may have all of their 9th graders go through that particular class. But basically what the student is doing is taking 2 hours of math. One is a pre-math, if you will, to deal with the kind of issues you're talking about, and then they take the algebra 1.
For schools that did not opt in to the CFA and the CSA, how did we measure their growth?
So teachers have created their own assessments. So teacher-made assessments. We have what we call exit ticket banks, where teachers can draw down exit tickets where they can use that as a quick assessment on what they've learned. So teachers are also maintaining, as well as our coaches, our AICs data trackers. So there's different ways that they're maintaining student performance over time. It's just that when we made this optional this year, because we had so many assessments and given the pandemic, we wanted to pull back on that, but still ensuring that there was a way that schools were still able to monitor student progress over time.
And just from the data that you have from the teacher-made assessments, does it seem comparable and in line with the results that you're seeing in the CSA and CFA?
It varies by school because it depends on what the teacher is actually assessing. So what one teacher may be assessing in one classroom in one building may be different. It's based on the need. So it could be different. But within those data trackers, we can actually see that they are assessing these standards. It's the manner in which they're going about it.
Okay, so all schools are being assessed on the same standards. They just may use different assessments.
That is correct.
Dr. Knight, Dr. Roberts brought up a great point in one of our work sessions last year about how our accreditation is tied to achievement for special groups. And those special groups are listed in our scorecard and all of that. Seeing this, I think for the future, would it be possible for us to see achievement also by those special groups? So see that disaggregated data so that we know how we're performing as it relates to our accreditation. So
Yes.
For example, English as second, ESOL learners,
Okay.
our special, again, those special groups. Students of color, et cetera.
So you're asking for a disaggregation based on like the ELL population, special education population? Yes, we can provide that. So our reading approach. And so this year we have, and this year as we've had in the past, the 3-tiered approach where we have tier 1, where all of our children are receiving consistent instruction. Tier 2, those kids who need additional intervention, frequent assessments, small group instruction, and then we also have what we call tier 3. And so what I'd like to highlight here for tier 1 is the parent communication. And so students who have IEPs, students who have 504s, we still keep the lines of communication open. We have the academic concern letters that we issue 3 times a year. and you should have received a copy of that. At the high school level, we have what we call the early detection form, where it is a form where the high school counselors are working with students every 2 weeks to monitor their progress, as well as academic recovery plans. And there could be different variations of these forms, but there is what we call a means to mitigate failures before they get too far ahead. And so we're keeping the lines of communication open with parents so that they know, so that it's not a surprise. They don't have to wait until October and March to find out exactly, or whenever the progress report is issued, if their child is indeed failing. And so this is tier 2. And as I said, this is based on small group intervention, small group instruction, differentiated instruction, as well as differentiated instruction through the use of supplemental resources, LLI, SIPs. And the intent on being in a tier 2 intervention is that it's fluid. So it's not intended to be that you're assigned to tier 2 indefinitely. Kids move in and out of the tiers based on the need. And then we have the tier 3 instruction. Any questions?
Do we have reading specialists assigned to each school so that you could, catch a student early and give individual attention to them without having to take the teacher's time?
So we don't have one reading specialist at every building. That is part of our plan, our upgrade plan for next year. However, we do have AICs, our academic instructional coaches, who provide support to small groups of students, as well as providing instructional support to teachers.
So with the new plan, with the school closings, reading specialists will be added.
Reading teachers will be added to every elementary school that has a GLE or grade level under 3.0 or third grade. And so that's all schools right now, with the exception of 2 or 3.
Now, these grade levels are, you track from 1st through 8th grade. Is that what these are? The tracking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I'm sorry, which?
On page 17, you're tracking reading.
Oh, on
levels.
the star? Those are the grade levels.
Those are the grade levels. Okay. I guess it seems that over time, the reading gets worse and worse, which seems to, directly relate to the ACT scores that we're seeing. And, I guess it seems like we just need to make sure we have a firm plan with reading specialists. And I think I'm passionate about this because honestly, in 4th grade, I went to the reading specialist in my classroom, and my reading had individual attention, and my reading level went up 2 grades. And I think it's so important. I can imagine what my life would be had I not had that help. So I just hope that we really use the reading specialist to give individualized attention to students who are struggling with reading.
Yes, ma'am, that is our intent. And so we are excited and happy that we will be able to move forward with having a reading interventionist in our buildings, because the data suggests that our children need it. And so we are looking forward to that and having a really strong plan in place in terms of delivery of instruction for the reading interventionist, what exactly we are expecting them to do, and what's the evidence of impact by having a reading interventionist, one in every building, separate and apart from the AICs.
Just a quick follow-up. The AIC will collaborate with the reading intervention teacher, and so both staff persons will be working directly with students in need of additional remediation.
That is correct.
One more clarifying question. So on page, slide 17, the dark blue bar at the bottom, the grade level equivalent, winter 2020, those are individual classes of students, right?
These are these are cohorts of children. So if I may, so if you look at.
So light blue, dark blue is one cohort.
Say it again, I can't hear you.
Light blue, dark blue is one cohort.
Yes,
that's correct.
that is correct.
That's correct.
That is correct. So if you look at 1st grade, the light blue, they were a kindergartner last year, first grader this year. And so we were showing the cohort over time. And so this is how this really just kind of demonstrates what's happening. And to your point, Ms. Fowler, as children are getting older, the need is becoming greater in terms of readability levels. And this just gives you a much more broader picture. So first, starting at first grader. So this is a kindergartner fall, kindergartner winter, first grade fall, first grade winter. So we're tracking the longitudinal performance of these cohorts over time. And then this slide really captures the need at the middle school level to continue to provide support to teachers through professional development, through small group instruction, through frequent formative assessments to determine how kids are growing over time. Any questions there?
So for like beginning on slide 17, understand that these are cohorts and we're kind of comparing from year to year. What does this represent? The district average? Is this one specific class?
This is the district.
So the first grade, the district-wide grade equivalent for first grade is like in the middle of second grade?
Yes. Yes, that's what the data's telling us.
Do we know what percentage of students were tested?
I have the number of kids.
Okay.
So I do have the number.
That would work.
And so for first grade, Ms. Rhodey Collins, it's 129, but let me be clear with that. It's 129 kids, but many of those children may have been in early literacy. So they may have not tested out of early literacy and they were able to take the actual STAR assessment. So early literacy are those early literacy letter identification, print awareness, recognition. So it's those, so that's why the number seems low, but those kids may not have tested out at that time. Some of the kids may still be taking early literacy.
So that's 129 kids out of how many first graders, for example?
I don't want to tell you something wrong.
Approximately
15?
about 1,500 students.
15.
So this would be a good statistical sample then. This would be a good statistical sample then.
Not
No,
necessarily, no.
Basically, what happens is all students don't take the STAR assessment in first grade. They take a lower assessment called, what is it called again, Dr.
STAR, early literacy.
STAR early literacy. So they're not included in this pool. When you get the second, third, fourth, fifth, then all students are taking a STAR assessment.
That's correct. That is correct.
So what students would be recommended to take it? Because if and I understand these are different cohorts, but if they're ending first grade at a 2.6 with this subset, and then I guess everyone is taking it in second and it's significantly lower, are we thinking this 129, is this 129 the students who we know would be more successful with this test?
So when you say more successful, you mean, so if we when we look at this data again this time next year, predicting performance,
I'll stay with the first question. So how is that 129 chosen? So that subset, since everyone doesn't take it, how do we decide who does take it in first grade?
So it's based on those kids who've tested out of early literacy. So we know based on that dashboard who qualifies to take STAR and who still needs to take STAR early literacy.
Okay. So statistically speaking, that winter 2020 number, or that second winter number for every cohort, would probably be always higher than second grade, that first part of the cohort.
I'm not sure.
So we're assuming that the place where the 2.68 number is always going to be statistically higher than the 1.37, both because we're testing more students and because the students who are testing at that 2.68 are a small subset that we know are somewhat advanced compared to the rest of first graders.
So typically our early grade students test on level. It's when they get to the anchor grades, second, third, and fourth is when they start to decline. So to answer your question, yes. So we do expect that, but over time, they do have a tendency to drop off. There is a decrease.
I think the discussion is kind of, we're talking about early literacy and we're talking about STAR. And so they're on level at the early literacy level. The decline starts at grade 2. Have we determined what is causing the declines in the anchor grades?
Yeah, so when we look at the skills that's being assessed, there is a greater leap to comprehension and vocabulary development, which is similar to what I talked about with Scantron reading and the standards. And so the vocabulary development, we're still working through that. That is a challenge. And comprehension. The passages, the reading passages, Dr. Roberts, they get longer. And it takes more time for them to get through that. So if they're already a struggling reader, to be able to read a page-long passage and respond to the questions, they have to be able to have that level of recall, and oftentimes they struggle with that.
And so are we building their capacity? If we know they're struggling with a longer passage, do we build their capacity so that over time their attention is on the longer passage? So what are the interventions that are in place to ensure that we capture their attention long enough to complete a longer assignment?
Sure. So within LLI, our leveled literacy intervention, they have an opportunity to spend more time working through those, building stamina, being able to respond to questions, knowing how to respond to questions when they have long passages. So we are addressing that through that tier 2 and sometimes that tier 3 intervention.
So I think I mean, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I think I am missing something. How do we know, to the point that Dr. Roberts asked, how do we know that they're on track in first grade if we're only testing less than 10% of first graders, but we're testing all of them second and beyond?
What we do know are the first graders who are testing within STAR and not early literacy. The expectation is that they are on track because they're no longer tested in early literacy. So that's how we know. It's just that once they have tested out of this lower level assessment and they are now they've demonstrated the ability to move into the actual STAR test. And once they get into that STAR test, sometimes when by the data, they struggle with that. And so they've tested out of early literacy, the pre-primer, they've tested out of that. That's how we know that they are ready to actually take the STAR assessment.
Right, and I get that. And that's the less than 10% of first graders. But once it gets to second grade, all of the first graders, or all of those, even the 90% of first graders who didn't test are testing, regardless of whether they passed.
That is correct.
So
yes.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I'm
yes.
saying that those second grade numbers represent 100% of that previous year, but the first grade numbers only represent 10%.
That is correct, because many of those children are still, to your point, they're still in early literacy. They're not quite ready.
So and this will be my final point. So to me, and of course I'd have to dive more into the data, but it seems less of something's missing between first and second grade. There still might be something missing, and more of the 90% that were in pre-literacy and not even ready to take the STAR test are now taking the STAR test.
Correct. You're right. They're taking early literacy. They have not qualified. They haven't mastered the skills to move beyond the pre-primer stage into that level of independence. And so you're right.
So setting aside the younger grades that use the STAR and early literacy, what percentage of our students were tested in these higher grades? And it can be an estimate, just like ballpark. I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so we know this first grade number represents a smaller subset. Are these higher grades, are they more representative of the district? Do we know what percentage of students are captured here?
More like 60%.
Okay. So the students who were not tested, do we know what that can be attributed to?
At the higher grades, it could be that they did not take the assessment at all. They didn't log in.
Remember, the 2020 data was online 100%. So that data is skewed across the entire district. 100% of students, basically about 95% take the test when they're in person. But online, we've had real challenges around kids logging in and taking the assessment.
So for the students who aren't captured here, do we have a sense of where they would fall?
We have some sense. We're doing school reviews this week. We're looking at that very specific data that you're referring to. But again, students did not take the assessment. We don't have data. Teachers are looking at, even in some cases when students' numbers were much higher than they have normally been, and they've gone back and asked those parents to bring kids in such that they could test students in person as opposed to online. So the difference between 2019 and 2020 is really light years difference because of the pandemic and the fact that students were in person and then not in person for the winter 2020 assessment.
Right, and my underlying concern here is students that aren't logging in to take the assessments likely are not necessarily performing on grade level or potentially not. And so I don't want our students to be lost. And this may be a larger question. I know we have quite a bit more to go, so we can revisit at the end, but particularly for students who aren't logging in or we are aware that they're not taking assessments, how are we making sure that they're not lost? And when we do someday hopefully return to fully in-person learning, how are we preparing for that? Because likely their scores would be lower than what's represented here. And I don't want to see our kids get lost.
So you raised the $1 million question, President, because that is a challenge that we're facing. On a regular basis, about 80% of our students are logging in. There are 4 categories that we are getting information from principals on now. Some kids have never logged in ever. In other words, from March of last year to now, students have never logged in, never got material, nothing at all. No records have been requested to say kids have gone to other places. That's level 1. Level 2, students who have picked up technology, but still have not logged on at all, period, 0. Level 3, kids who have picked up technology are logging in for an hour and then logging off. So they're on for a very short period of time and have not completed assignments. And lastly, students who are students who are coming in virtual, but the week that we are doing in person, they're coming in and they're doing assignments, but the week that we're doing virtual, they're not logging in at all. So we're looking at all of those categories, looking at all of the data to find out what more we can do outside of knocking on doors, going to homes, tracking students down to assist them in that way. And schools are identifying that information right now. But overall, about 80% of the students are logging in on a regular basis, about 80%. About 20% are in the categories I kind of alluded to on some days, not on some days, on an hour and off. In a school review today, a principal indicated that a kid got on at 1 o'clock today. Very excited about getting on at 1 o'clock, and the principal said, "We're about to dismiss now. You just got on." And so that's the kind of challenges that we are addressing on a daily basis. But it is a challenge.
Well, that's very helpful context. Thank you.
Early childhood. So we know that enrollment is low, that teachers continue to provide quality instruction. What I want to highlight here is our teachers are maximizing the partnerships, and they're ensuring the strong homeschool connections, virtual field trips to the Magic House with Ready Readers. We mentioned a few weeks ago several of our teachers who are participating in Room 9 through PBS 9 Network. So we're really proud of that. What I'd like to say here is to ensure the homeschool connection, have several teachers who've really taken this process and really moved it along in terms of they've created what they call bedtime stories. And so they have children and families who log in at 6:30, and that is they read a story to the families. And so that's another way that they are ensuring that strong homeschool connection. You've seen these numbers. We are working with the marketing team to recruit our families back into the district for 21-22. We will start that process. Our plan typically is that we start registration in February, early March, and the process goes throughout the summer months. But I know that the marketing team is working aggressively to begin to recruit and retain families.
Do we partner with parents as teachers to encourage parents to get their children enrolled in early childhood?
We do. We have a parents as teachers coordinator. We have parent educators in the district, and we partner with the National PAT Center where they provide training because we are considered an affiliate. English as a second language. To ensure continuous support of our ELL learners, the ESOL office continues to concentrate on these 4 areas, particularly during this pandemic virtual time. Instruction, where they are conducting virtual walkthroughs and coaching to support ELL instruction, professional development, ensuring that teachers are participating in PD sessions, both in as well as out of the district. ELL support, where we have the porch deliveries that we started last spring. You may recall that that's still going on, as well as not just food boxes, but as well as the hygiene kits that we're still providing. And then there's been a considerable amount of support that's been given to translation with our families, especially when we're doing the surveys. We just ensure that many of the families, that those surveys are translated quickly. So that families have an opportunity to ensure that they have voice moving forward.
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
What consideration has been given around, and if you guys have done it already, I haven't seen it, providing tabs that will enable our website to switch different languages for people in our district that do not speak English?
I know, Lori, the Office of Institutional Advancement is working on that. We do know that our website does need to be updated. In fact, we were just talking about that. And one of the areas that is missing is the ability to have the website to be viewed in different languages. So I know that OIA is working on that.
Okay, perfect.
Should be up and running by next year.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
This is just an example of the proficiency support at Mann School. And if you notice on the y-axis, well, let me back up. The language development assessment is given in October. It's given in the fall. And these are the results. DESE has indicated that children who are in the district 4 years or less should have a proficiency level of 15%. If they are in a cohort where they've been in the country for 4 or more years, then that proficiency level is higher. But our benchmark, our baseline that we focus on is 15%. As you can see in 2019, We were on a path of doing quite well, providing that proficiency support to our kids. But in 2020, as you can see, because of the pandemic, we struggled in that area. These are the 4 domains for the language assessment: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we did have a challenge, as you very well know, with this. Instructional support, this is the walkthroughs and the coaching cycles, and the formatting is off, but in 2019, we captured actual walkthroughs. In 2020, we captured virtual walkthroughs. Coaching in 2019, virtual coaching in 2020. Language access support, and this is what I mentioned previously, where our translators and our interpreters were providing an enormous amount of support to our families, especially during this time. And as you can see by the numbers, there has been a significant uptick of support here. Professional development. So this goes back to April when we started this work with professional development, ensuring that we were providing modules, ongoing PD during the summer, ensuring that our PD series, Every Teacher is a Virtual Teacher, that is our theme this year. If you notice on the next slide, we've offered 374 sessions where we've had over 6,000 participants, this is only January. And so I do anticipate that by the end of the year that this number will double. So this will be the most professional development that we've offered. The advantage to doing it is because we are able to do this virtually as well. Our recorded sessions, you'll see that we've had over 700 views of our recorded sessions. And so what I hear when I'm dropping into some of these PD sessions that teachers make reference to sessions that we offered last summer, and that they make the suggestion to go back and look at the recorded session. As I mentioned previously, our virtual learning playbook captures all of this. So if there's a session, Ms. Jones, that you want to go back and see, just to see what teachers are doing, you have the ability to go back and do that. So all of these sessions are recorded and captured under the virtual learning tab. We are getting feedback from our teachers. They love giving us feedback. They tell us what's working well, and they also tell us what's not working well. So we make those adjustments. What we're also doing in the spring is that we will be taking the time to realign our 5-year PD plan. We did have a 5-year PD plan, but of course we had to change it due to the pandemic. So we're looking to revise and realign the comprehensive professional development plan. Leadership development, that's for our principals as well as our AICs. Our focus this year, and will continue to be so, is around curriculum, instruction, assessment, culturally responsiveness, as well as maintaining engagement of families. And so this is a chart that just captures the support that our AICs have been giving to our teachers during this time. There is a significant increase, almost 2,000 observations and coaching cycles where AICs have really been working hard to support classroom teachers. And so this number has jumped significantly compared to this time last year. Any questions? Special education. Just wanted to remind us the numbers. We have over 3,600 children who are receiving special services. Currently, we have 1,376 who are receiving in-person learning, and 2,293 children who are still receiving virtual. Form G is the form that we use to ensure that we are meeting the needs of children during school closures and distance learning. So we are still remaining compliant. What I will say about special education, and I'm sure you all know this, is that we do struggle with staffing. It is a challenge for us to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all the children and to fill many of these vacancies. But just know that we are addressing that issue, but it is a real issue that we are attempting to address to ensure that these Form Gs are completed before the end of the year. Any questions on that?
How are we recruiting for those positions?
So the special ed director is working with HR. She's constantly updating me as well as Dr. Adams around vacancies, filling positions. She's going into Nimble, which is our database, to see what's out there. So she's been really active in trying to fill these positions, but it's been a challenge all year.
I guess I'm
We all,
wondering.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
We also have a supplemental health services that helps us to address some of these vacancies. So where we have hard to fill vacancies, we work with supplemental health care, and they are able to identify staff for us.
Have we identified any partnerships that would enable us to get more qualified staff to take on these specific positions? Like any schools that we know have certain programs that people, graduate out of that would specialize in this specific area, maybe?
Yes, you have 2 items on the agenda next week for MOUs from Webster University, and I want to say Maryville to
SLU.
try to
St. Lucie.
SLU. That is an internship program such that they could do their internships with us, and then we try to convince them to work in the district. So we've had some success in that, very, very small, but that's why we have these MOUs out here to try to do that. The real challenge, quite frankly, Ms. Jones, is the competition of SSD. They pay dramatically more than our teachers pay. And so that has become a challenge throughout the entire time I've been here in terms of teachers coming to get first, second, and third year with us and then going to SSD for employment because they pay substantially more than we pay.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Adams, is there some way that we can get some redress at the state level? Because we could possibly ask retirees to come in, but somehow their pension is impacted if that happens. So is there any discussion around getting some concession at that level?
I can check. I'm not sure what HR has done in that space. I know that it's only for a certain number of days that they can work with us without being impacted by as you said. So I know you're familiar with the DROP program that used to be in place, and they got rid of that. From my understanding, that would allow an employee to be retired and still work for 3 years. And so I can do some research and find out, Dr. Roberts, and get back with you on it.
And we do have some retirees, not many, but we do have some retirees who are providing the related services. But to Dr. Adams' point, it is temporary. St. Louis Plan. And so the core tenet of the St. Louis Plan is to provide support to new teachers, teachers who are new to the profession, as well as teachers who are new to the district. This is done through coaching, as well as meeting weekly. Our consultant teachers, as well as our induction coaches, conduct what they call the reflective process, because part of this work as a new teacher is to be able to reflect on his or her practice. We currently have 10 consultant teachers and we have 2 induction coaches. As you know, the consultant teachers work with teachers who are new to the profession. The induction coaches work with those teachers who are new to the district. So the needs definitely vary. And the next 2 slides just captures data in terms of retention of new teachers over time. In 2019, 2020, we had approximately 148 teachers. And you can see based on resignations, voluntarily or involuntarily, and those who remained well after their first year with a 72, almost a 73% retention at the end of the their first year. And then this captures our mid-year point with St. Louis Plan. We currently have 83 teachers who are new, who've been assigned a consultant teacher, and the percentage of those teachers currently right now is 100%, but remember, this is completing the first semester. And so I'm happy to come back and give you more data toward the end of the year in terms of those retention numbers. So next steps. The Next Steps Committee has been created to really speak to what we said we were going to do around school closings and to ensure that this work continues to move forward with fidelity. What's also on the table and being proposed, looking at our summer plan for 2021. Right now, we're currently looking at having, but of course, this is all contingent, it could change, having summer learning in every building, because the intent is that we are addressing the issue of learning loss, where we are bringing children back and giving them an opportunity to be in school longer, almost like having extended or year-round school, as opposed to just coming back for a few weeks. The reading interventionist, I talked about that earlier, where they are working with small groups of students and to work with classroom teachers to design their tier 1 and tier 2 instruction. And then equity ABAR, we will continue to move forward with that. We just had our first session with our leaders last week around equity. Our ABAR curriculum is in the hands of our teachers. I am excited to say, but I don't want to jinx it. We are looking to, right now, it's not confirmed, February 27th as our first equity virtual conference. And so more information is coming, but this will be a first for us to really highlight and showcase the work that we're doing around equity. So there's more information to come. Also within equity, there is a white paper that was shared with the superintendent around equity and creating the equity index. So when we're talking about upgrading and not just using the term equity for equity's sake, but being very clear on what it means, there is an entire white paper on what our work in St. Louis Public Schools means around equity.
Regarding the reading interventionist teacher, according to this, you're going to work with students in small groups. Is the intent never to work with students who are really having reading issues on an individual basis, or is it always going to be in groups, and are we always going to delegate some of this reading improvement to teachers for those students who are really struggling?
No, ma'am, but thank you for clarifying. So when we're talking about the design, and so what's the core expectation or the core tenet around being a reading interventionist? They will be working with small groups of students. However, you know, you may have a reading interventionist who works after school, who is a tutor for a student. So it depends on the need. But when we talk about just the actual design of what the expectations are with the reading teacher, they will work with small groups. But in the event that there's a need to work, you know, teachers do it all the time where Paula needs additional support, the teacher may work one-on-one with Paula.
I guess my concern is when we have the teachers having to do this along with take care of everything with other students, I think students are still going to fall behind versus taking a student out who has scored very low in reading on their assessment and pulling that student out, you know, to work separately and away from their peers with a reading coach or reading interventionist, where there's no fear of teasing or anything like that. I think that makes a huge difference. And when we, even in small groups or up to the teacher to work one-on-one, and that teacher has so many other responsibilities in that classroom, it seems that we'll still stay well behind in reading. I mean, when our average reading level for 8th grade, it's less than 5th grade. You know, it's kind of, you know, ironic to talk about college readiness when you leave 8th grade and you have a 5th grade, lower than a 5th grade reading level. It just, I mean, how do you prepare for college or ACT if your reading is horrible? How do you do well in college, or if your reading is not up to par? How do you be effective in a career if your reading's up to par? And I just hope we look really good at the reading program, because I think that if a student can't read well, and I teach college students, and I will say, it's nothing worse than getting students who cannot read, and we know they graduated from high school, and we get too many students like that. And what happens is they fall behind, and you know, the inequities of life hit them harder. So I hope we really look at this a little bit more carefully to provide individual help to students.
Yes, ma'am.
That's
Thank
just
you.
a suggestion. I'm not looking for an answer tonight.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I get clarity around that, please? When looking at the reading interventionist teacher, is that not going to be just one position that is dedicated to a small set of students, or is this going to be a classroom teacher that is taking on an extra capacity.
So thank you. I was going to speak to that in a second. And when Mrs. Fowler said she wasn't looking for answer and wanted to come back, this is a dedicated person, not teaching regular kids,
Exactly.
Right.
but pulling kids out, working with small groups of kids, in some cases, individual kids. So this teacher will not have a class. This teacher will not have any class students assigned to them. They'll come and get Calvin Adams out of class for 2 hours or an hour and work with him, but small groups of students as well, while the teacher might have 15 kids, that person might have 3 kids, while the teacher is still working with her students. But that is a dedicated person just on reading in that building, doesn't have any other students assigned to them.
Yep.
So that may
Not
address.
a teacher of record.
It is not a teacher of record. This person strictly is assigned to working with students in reading only, with no other students assigned to them all day long.
Thanks
I did understand that. It's just the small group approach, helping students. I just think students who can't read tend to be afraid in small groups to really push themselves. So I just think individual attention helps more from a personal experience, at least.
I was going to say, Dr. Adams, thanks for explaining that. And I think that this is very much so a needed position in every single school. I was once a reading interventionist for the Readiness School District. And so when I pulled those kids out of class in those small groups, I would say it was very effective. So thank you.
Great, thank you. The virtual school. So our plan is to have a virtual school where the virtual program will be housed in a closed building, and it will be for grades K through 8. And the secondary students will have an opportunity to log into classes with a teacher who may not be in their building, but may be a teacher in another building across town. So the ability to, or the accessibility to have a class, it will no longer be an issue because they will have access to courses as well as teachers across the district. So we are looking, so more information is coming. There is a full plan. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not, but there is a full virtual design and implementation plan for the new school year. And then looking at academic instructional coaches, and this is still under construction. This is still pending right now in terms of how we look at maximizing instructional support for our AICs going into the new school year. We do have some AICs in some of our smaller buildings, less than 200. They may have 4 teachers that they are supporting, and you may have another AIC who's supporting 12 classroom teachers. So equitably, how do we ensure that we are maximizing that instructional support across all buildings? So there is a possibility of looking at restructuring AIC support going into the new year. And that concludes my mid-year update.
Dr. Knight, I have a couple additional questions. How throughout this year, particularly, we have students that are both virtual and in person, and differences across schools. How are we communicating with parents about the curriculum and those kinds of expectations, but also the academic progress of the children? Obviously, we're doing report cards and things like that, but kind of on an ongoing basis, since, as we know, there are a number of students who are harder to kind of touch or communicate with. What are the ways that we're reaching out to parents and giving them this information?
So I know the schools have their individualized plans for reaching parents. District-wide, one of the suggestions that was offered last summer was the start of the Parent Digest. How are we keeping the lines of communication open to all of our families? One of the points that came out, or that continues to come out from these data reviews that that Dr. Adams has scheduled for this week, is looking at engagement. And so how are schools ensuring that they are keeping their families engaged? How are they touching in? They're going in, they're knocking on doors, they are conducting what I call sidewalk visits. So they are staying in close communication with their families, because it is a difficult time. And especially if we know, as mentioned earlier, that children are struggling with logging in. I know that our social workers, counselors, classroom teachers, administrators, people are doing all that they can to stay connected by going into the homes and just walking the neighborhood to ensure that, hey, you can see us and that we're still here.
That sounds great. Thanks. I have one additional question. So looking ahead to next school year and thinking about this being the time when the bulk of our contracts are coming up, I know there were, we've kind of this switch to virtual. We've implemented platforms or products that we haven't used before, where the likelihood of continuing virtual, I think, is very good. If nothing else, with the virtual, the new virtual school that we're putting together. What are the ways that we're evaluating those different virtual products, or determining which are the right ones to continue using, or maybe the need for a switch to a different product?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you. We're working to look at the program, like a program evaluation. And I know that that was a question that came up in terms of how we are evaluating all of these programs. And so this is the time of year where we do that, because I will have to make a recommendation to the superintendent for next year. What do we keep and what do we take off the table? So a lot of that will be grounded in an actual program evaluation.
I think that's an excellent question. And part of what you will see next week when you receive the agenda, you will see a number of items on that are asking for renewals, and the data that you've requested in the past, the vendor performance, is included there as well. But we are asking that question. Some of what our principals are telling us is that they don't necessarily want to switch to a brand new platform right now through the pandemic. They would like to tweak some of the things that we have, but on a case-by-case basis, we are evaluating and getting feedback from principals regarding it, because they don't necessarily want to start a brand new something through the midst of this pandemic.
So throughout the program evaluation, will there be opportunities for teachers and parents and students to share their interpretation of how that product was
Absolutely.
useful?
Absolutely. Yes. We currently, I don't know if you know this, Ms. Rhodey Collins, I have a curriculum work group that I meet with every month. And part of this they give me feedback in terms of what's working and what's not. And so we will also be working with a group of teachers over the summer months, as we did last summer. So part of that will be for them to give us feedback on what's working and what's not. So yes, we definitely will do that.
And a quick follow-up, I do sit in on that curriculum work group, and our teachers are very candid with their feedback. And so, again, I'm with you, Dorothy, we should get feedback from teachers, students, and parents around how those platforms are working.
Yes, thank you for that.
Dr. Adams, do we see next year being completely virtual, or what are our thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. I think there will be a combination. We will find out once the vaccine is in place. Dr. Knight mentioned the notion of summer school. We're looking to have an extended summer school with kids actually coming back much earlier and actually spending time in their building, hopefully to get them used to being back in school. A lot of our students, quite frankly, board, have been just disengaged, just totally 100% disengaged with not being engaged at all in a lot of different ways. Because if a kid's parents are working, then that kid is independent to get on that platform by his or herself. So we want to try to get them back in the flow of school starting this summer. That is our hope and desire. But I would think right now, board member, that it is likely that we will have some combination of both. I'm hoping more in person than virtual, but we have to wait to see what happens with the pandemic and the virus and the vaccine.
That's right.
Dr. Adams, based on what you just shared, how is the state determining that our students need to come back in person to be assessed based on the disengagement level, the platforms, and et cetera?
Well, superintendents and myself as well have articulated that our view regarding it, but DESE has indicated that it is a non-negotiable and students have to. I think they're being asked by the legislative body what are students doing? Private and parochial schools are in place, public schools are not. So they want to know how students have, what's the tool to measure student achievement? And so at this point in time, it's non-negotiable. Students have to take the the federal assessment, the assessment, and they're giving some options around the possibility of homegrown or district assessments. But at this point in time, it is non-negotiable. All students have to take the assessment and they have to be in person. Thank you, Dr. Knight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the presentation for tonight.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the moratorium on new schools, so a resolution for this board to consider, as I indicated at the end of the last meeting. So I'll read it here. You do have a copy in front of you. There was one small typo that will be corrected in the final version. So I'll read that. Whereas the population of school-aged children ages 5 to 19 decreased by 18.6% between 2007 and 2018. Whereas the public school system in the city of St. Louis includes both traditional district schools and charter schools. Whereas in 2007 to 8, there were 103 public schools serving 60,642 children. And in 2019-2020, there were 110 public schools serving 49,939 children. Whereas the local, state, and federal support for school choice programs continues to create a system of schools and programs that fight over declining population of children. Whereas St. Louis Public Schools has been considering and continues to face the challenge of school closures in order to best serve the current student population. Whereas the city of St. Louis needs a citywide plan for education to ensure the public school system provides a quality education for all kids all the time. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the city of St. Louis supports a moratorium on new school openings in the city of St. Louis until a comprehensive citywide plan for education is developed. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be delivered to the members of the Board of Aldermen of the city of St. Louis and other elected officials to encourage discussion of and action toward the urgent need for the development of a citywide plan for education, and to encourage the adoption of a resolution in support of a moratorium on new school openings until such a plan is developed. So you have this here before you, received a copy in email. I would entertain any discussion on this or additional edits or changes.
Have we thought about how we would get this in the hands of the aldermen, and if we could get, do we have an alderman 2 or 3 who would serve as our, our voice to get this heard and discussed amongst the alder people?
So the first part, how to get it into the hands of them. So if we follow our standard practice, we would vote on this at the February meeting, so in 2 weeks. If it were approved, I would send it out the following morning, a signed, dated resolution to the clerk of the Board of Aldermen and the individual aldermen as well. As to how their process would proceed for a resolution on their end, someone would need to bring that resolution to the board. I don't have names right now of someone that would do that, no.
I have a question, Dorothy. Question and statement. So I'll start with the questions. Could you speak to why you chose the data points on the first line that talks about the population of school-aged children between the ages of 5 and 19 decreased by 18.6% in 2017, in between the time of 2007 and 2018, and then also why you chose the data in the third line as well of this document, and then I have some suggestions.
Sure. So these data points were the ones that we used as we considered school closure. So these are the ones that we have used throughout the process. And so using them here, I thought provided some consistency with just consistency between this resolution and the presentations that we've already presented to the public. Yeah, I think that's the primary reason.
Okay, thank you for that. And then also, on the fifth line where it says, whereas St. Louis Public Schools has been considering and continues to face the challenge of school closures in order to best serve the current student population. I'm proposing that instead of saying St. Louis Public Schools has been considering, it says St. Louis Public Schools has closed and continues to face the challenge of school closures in order to best serve the current student population, because we did vote to do that.
We did, yes. So this was a clause that I went back and forth a lot on and was
Yeah.
just struggling to communicate. So I'm hearing something along the lines of, whereas St. Louis Public Schools has recently closed.
So just simply saying St. Louis Public Schools has closed and continues to face the challenges of school closures in order to best serve the current student population. And so when looking at this looks like a supporting statement to say, hey, you know, the population has decreased over these amount of years due to the X, Y, and Z systems. And so therefore we've had to close schools because of this issue, and we still continue to face this issue.
Yes, I agree. That sounds good. I will make that change.
And then lastly, on the last paragraph where we talk about be it further resolved, it says that a copy of this resolution be delivered to the members of the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis. And I'm proposing either we get specific in saying that we'll give it to also the committee persons, state legislators, senators, or simply say, like we said in the beginning, give this to our local, federal, and state leaders. And then if that language is accepted, we are encouraging them, but what is going to be our ask and or our demand?
So one of the reasons, or maybe the only reason that I specifically named the Board of Aldermen here is that was what was included in our vote on Tuesday night, was specific to the Board of Aldermen, adding in additional elected officials. I was trying not to bog it down with too many specifics. I would be happy to send it to anyone that this board desires. But I also wanted to be mindful of it maintaining some readability. And so adding in everyone specifically, but I have no issue. I will send it out wherever you all want me to send it.
Well, I think that this is important because when we're inclusive and we're not just speaking to one group, we can say we did send it to the committee people, the Board of Aldermen, the state reps, and also the senators, because if we look at the legislature right now, we're facing legislation that could destroy the future of St. Louis Public Schools because of charter school bills that are coming down the line. And so this resolution needs to be put forth to our state representatives as well as our senators.
So how do you suggest the wording?
So I'm wondering, do you all think that if you like this, should we say that if we're gonna be specific, say committee persons, I'm just kind of going down like the chain, committee persons, Board of Aldermen, your state reps, the state senators, that type of thing? Or should we just say, give it to all of our elected officials on the local, state, and federal level? Because that will encompass all of them.
Yes. So I am still going to specifically name the Board of Aldermen as that was part of the vote, but I will add in, so where it says and other, I will add in local, state. So tell me who you mean by federal.
I mean, just like our elected officials in the state of Missouri overall,
so I'll say
right?
local,
Yeah.
local and state elected officials.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Just a couple of comments. I'm sorry, I can't see her mic, but okay. Just a couple of comments. I like that we're doing this. One thing I would ask the board members, of course, including myself, is that we either call our aldermen in our districts and try to deliver these, even though we deliver it as a board, but also try to maybe get some time to deliver it to our personal aldermen, and so that we could express how important this is to us. Another thing too, I was thinking about as I was going over this, was that this board may need to consider setting up an advocacy committee so that we can always have people aware of what's going on, and also people who would try to ensure we're heard as a board and we are speaking on behalf of our school district. I got to attend a forum. It was a Zoom forum via Facebook on Saturday with one of the candidates for mayor, and it was actually a really good forum. I enjoyed listening to that candidate and the answers that were given. The one thing I left the meeting thinking about is what happens if a mayor does not think the St. Louis Public School is the answer to public education. You know, we had a mayor some time ago who really supported charter schools, and wow, we have plenty of them now. And I think an advocacy committee may help us get the mayor's attention as well as our aldermen, the attention of our aldermen, because we want a mayor who does consider the St. Louis Public Schools an important entity in the city. Now, the forum I was on, although my question wasn't answered, I was pleased with the answers that were given regarding public schools. But I began to think, you know, what do the other candidates think about public schools? And we need to know that. So, so I'm suggesting an advocacy committee be set up. And then the other thing is, so that's a suggestion. The other question, a question I have is, have we contacted the candidates for mayor to hold a forum regarding public schools? And if so, when that would take place?
So I have not contacted them personally about a forum. I have no idea how to do a forum. I know that there was some discussion of finding a partner. Do you have anything to add?
So we are working on a plan to try to do so. I will probably I will give you an update at the February board meeting where we are in that place. And I have spoken to at least one of the candidates who, quite frankly, did call me the Monday before the vote, and so is recorded as doing so. But so yes, I did mention that to that candidate, and they were interested possibly. Oh, well, I did mention it to them, and the idea of the other two candidates or three candidates, I have not spoken to them personally, but I know that there has been some contact with Local 420 as it relates to at least one or two. So I think there's some interest in terms of doing that, specifically around education, but no confirmation at this point in time. By the 11th, I can give the board some update.
Just remind us that the May 3rd is the primary, March 3rd rather is the primary, so we need to do this fairly soon. But the one I attended on Saturday was actually on Zoom, but opened on Facebook. And the reason and the way I learned about it is, you know, just being on Facebook, and they were, you know, there were blasts on Facebook about the forum. And I was able to commit to going. And when I signed in, my name had already been listed as a person to be on the call. We may have to do several since I think Zoom limits to 100, maybe something like that. But that particular forum was absolutely excellent. And I think I was thinking that was something that maybe we can do it, and we could possibly do it in that format, you know, with a moderator who asks questions of each candidate and allow them time to answer. It was very, very well done on Saturday.
I had an opportunity to sit in on most of the mayoral debates. Action St. Louis hosted one. The Democratic Central Committee has hosted one, and there have been others. And I'm happy to report that those persons who are running for the position of mayor stand with this resolution, a moratorium on opening new schools.
Further discussion or feedback on this resolution?
So Dorothy, in your opinion, because that was the second part of my question, while this isn't encouraging, it's encouraging document, what I'm still interested in hearing, because yes, I heard the same thing that Joyce heard, that they support the citywide plan, but realistically in their capacities, what do they foresee that they could actually support the district within this citywide plan? So do you believe that we should, you know, ask them that, or are we going in with a specific ask of what we believe they should be able to or can contribute to this, like in giving them this document, to make sure that there is some type of actionable items on the table for us to revisit and or discuss at a later date? If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'm open to doing any of those things. I just don't know how we can't, so I chose the word encourage because we can't make
Yeah.
anyone, right? But I also, part of the reason of us having this resolution is this then would become the position of the board. So then any board member, to Regina's point, can take this resolution and use it to engage with their own alderman or your own state rep or your own senator. So because if this were approved by the board, it becomes a position of the board. So then any board member is able to kind of take that and run with it. So I think it could take a number of paths, but I don't know, I don't know the mechanism to require action on someone else's part beyond sharing and then kind of taking those next steps.
Yeah, so I mean, that's fine if it's not included in here. I just want to make sure that we are being intentional around after we do this, that there will be a follow-up and some accountability that we should be receiving as we are taking this effort to make this happen.
Dorothy, if I wanted to propose an advocacy committee, what would I do to do that so that we can make sure we follow up on this and keep pushing?
Would you be proposing it as a standing or an ad hoc committee?
A standing.
So it would need to be presented to the board and voted on by the board. So it would need some type of a founding document that would include the purpose of the committee, what the committee is empowered to do, who might make up that committee. And I will look at the bylaw and see if there's anything else, but that's kind of the general, it does need to be voted on by the board to create a standing committee.
Okay, thank you.
Dorothy, do we need to reach out to our families as well in this resolution?
For what purpose?
If we're talking about a moratorium on schools, that's no guarantee that that will occur. And schools open because our families go to them. And so I'm just asking that question. If our families did not go to them, then that lends itself to a moratorium.
If our families didn't go,
Leave
I see.
leave the city schools to another school of choice.
Yes.
And so I don't need an answer. That's a
That's a good point.
consideration.
We can think about that. Yeah.
I mean, that's the power is in the families.
I agree with you. Yes. Other thoughts or consideration or changes? So I'll make these changes that were proposed here. We'll have a final copy to you sooner rather than later. These are fairly straightforward changes, but if you think of something else, please let me know. I'm happy to accommodate those as well, and we will have it on the agenda for a vote at the February meeting. With that, I will turn it over to Regina or Adam or Joyce, whoever would like to present about the mission and vision statement. Your mic's off.
In the board meeting dated 12/21/2020, we presented the proposed vision and mission statements. And we were just asked to make a couple of changes. One change was to include community. And then we added also political leaders to the word leaders, political. So the draft mission statement remained the same after our discussion at the 12/21 meeting. And that mission statement is the board of SLPS, St. Louis Public Schools, will govern to ensure students are fully prepared to be competent and valuable contributors to be a global society, contributors to a global society by ensuring students are provided with innovative and high quality public education. And the draft, the final vision statement that we came up with the changes requested is the SLPS board will govern boldly to ensure students in the district meet and exceed local, state, and federal standard achievement levels. We will govern and advocate for collaboration with community, which was the word community was we were asked to add that, organizations, political leaders, and here instead of just saying leaders, we put political, and businesses in our region to provide students with innovative and high-quality educational experiences. So last time, we just left with suggestions to revise it, to include those suggestions, to bring it to this meeting for a vote.
Are there questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Susan.
So it looks good overall. I just have a question and a potential small change. And so in the final draft of the vision statement, it says the SLPS board will govern boldly. So I'm going to stop there. Could you just tell me, what does that mean? To boldly ensure students.
Well, it means doing things like doing this moratorium. It means doing things like setting up an advocacy committee so that we can actually push our leaders to support us better. It means being out there and present in our community to ensure our St. Louis public schools are supported and reckoned with. So instead of being passive board members, we're asking that we be more intentional in our duties and assertive in our duties.
Okay, thank you, Regina. And then secondly, on the second sentence, it says, and then we will govern and advocate for collaboration. And so we say govern in the first sentence, it says SLPS board will govern boldly to ensure students. Then the second sentence, it says again, we will govern and advocate. And I'm wondering, should we say we will advocate for the collaboration, for collaboration with community organizations, et cetera, instead of saying it again?
I think that's a good point. I don't think we have to repeat govern, to be honest.
I mean, it's not huge, but
yeah, it was certainly something we didn't think about because our focus was on the words
community
after govern in. Oh, Adam wants to say something.
We did, and I mean, we can still take it out. The point, I think, when we were talking about it for putting it in there was to make sure that when we were talking about partnerships, we were speaking from a place of governance, not from a place of operations.
Okay.
So if we can word that in a better way, we can do that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. I forgot about that. So are you okay with us leaving it, or do you want us to?
Well, I mean, I'm just one small voice, but I mean, I think we already said govern, but if everyone thinks that we will govern for a second time is fine, then that's it. But that was just something that I noticed that didn't seem as necessary, but
Okay, we think we could reword it, but I was wondering if it was okay to take a vote with the idea that we would reword that and present the rewording.
Oh, okay.
We have the option to vote today if that is what the board would like to do. But also, we don't have to. We would need a motion in a second. So I have one minor change, and I apologize for I don't know what I didn't call attention to it on your previous draft, but it should be a straightforward change. Our legal name by state statute is the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis. So if that could be reflected in the mission and vision, because that is legally by statute, the name of this body.
The Board of Education of the City of St. Louis?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
So I apologize. It didn't jump out at me until looking at it today.
I have no problem pushing it to be voted on at our next meeting, especially since I think with the changes that we need to make, and then also with 2 board members not being here, just the opportunity for them to see and provide feedback too.
I agree with Adam. I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, so I'll add this to the February, whatever day it is, the February 9th, I think?
Yeah, the first meeting in February?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Are there further questions or discussion on the mission and vision, proposed mission and vision? Okay, the final item on our agenda is a proposed update to the Code of Ethics. This is on behalf of the Governance Committee, who is, I know Natalie is the governance chair. She is not here tonight. who is presenting, or would you like to move this to the next work session?
Both Dr. Roberts and myself was on the committee. I mean, we went through, I would say that we went through all the code of ethics that was there already in the old code of ethics, I should say, that was written, I believe, in 2012, and we revised some of the wording. And what we did is we separated the code of ethics in two parts. And this is actually the first part. These are the, I guess, statements, affirmative statements, and then we have some statements that are you know, the things that we won't do. So we're presenting today just those statements that we are asking each board member to uphold and do as board members. I can ask, or Dr. Roberts, I mean, I can answer, or Dr. Roberts can answer any questions that you may have on any particular statement. And if we can't, if we don't have the answers, then we may have to hold this off until Natalie is here.
So that second list that you're referring to, is that not then part of the code of ethics, or what's the title of that document?
It's called the, I have to look it up on my computer.
But it's a separate.
It is a separate document, yes.
So my one comment would be also to make sure that it is reflective of our legal name, the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis.
Okay, I will make sure we get that corrected.
Well, yeah, if you could look at that up, that would be good, because I think it would be kind of confusing to have two codes of ethics, I guess it would just make sense to know what that is, since it was all together before, but now it's separated, or if you can just
I
provide.
think it was called the Code of Conduct. We have a Code of Ethics and then the Code of Conduct.
We started with the document that we put together in 2018, and we separated out the Code of Conduct specific is outlined here. And what we took out was not appropriate as a part of the Code of Conduct. That's why it's not reflected in the document before you. But I hope everyone has had a chance to review it. And if you have any additional changes, we'd like to take those under advisement now.
Yeah, I did have a chance to review it. I like the changes. I think it does reflect more of a welcoming, ethical stance of how we should work as a group. And I think this, in addition to the mission and vision, could provide a healthy basis for, again, future board members and how we work together going forward. Thank you all for your work on this.
So I think for the same reason that we're moving mission vision to a future date to vote due to missing a couple board members and there being some changes. My question is, do you want to vote on this at the meeting, or does the committee think that there'll be additional work and you'll bring back another draft at the February work session?
I think we're ready to move forward with this at the next meeting when all of the members are here and we can take a vote.
I agree.
So I will add both of those items into the February meeting agenda. If it is determined, after we're leaving here before the agenda is created, that there is additional work that you all want to do, let me know and we can move those things around. Any further discussion?
Yep. So my last question for you, Dr. Roberts and Ms. Fowler, is I think we had this conversation back in 2019 briefly, but again, 8 great sentences for the Code of Ethics. My question is, did you all talk amongst yourselves as committee people about what it would mean to, I guess, be in violation of the Code of Ethics, or how we work to ensure that the Code of Ethics is being upheld, so that it's something that we live and breathe, as opposed to a file that we have.
We didn't address that in the meeting, but that is appropriate. And perhaps we need to bring forth that document that we did create and take a look at it. Thank you for that, Adam.
Anything further? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make the motion that we adjourn.
I'll second. Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned.
Can I